There's growing political intrigue surrounding the appointment Governor Walker is expected to make to the state Supreme Court. The vacancy comes through the death 2 weeks ago of Justice Pat Crooks. He was not seeking re-election. 3 judges had already announced their intentions to run for the seat. Now the governor has the opportunity to appoint one of them or none of them. He could, for example, also appoint an interim justice. The governor might have dropped hints, though, about his thinking on Twitter last week when he cited examples of 2 justices who were appointed to the court and then went on to win in the next election. And they include our next guest, former State Supreme Court Justice Janine Geske. It's good to have you back on the program.
Glad to be here, Mike.
So what was your take on the governor tweeting about you? He even tweeted with a picture of you saying that you had been appointed by Tommy Thompson back in 1993 and then went on to run for office and was elected. What did you make of that?
Well, I'm always glad when the governor tweets something good as opposed to something bad. It was interesting. I think he's obviously laying the groundwork, I think, to make an appointment and probably make appointment of somebody who's going to run for that position. Although I would point out to the governor that I was not running for the position when I was appointed. There were people that had announced, and I had no intention of running, so I was appointed sort of out of a field of lawyers. But I think the governor is saying he's going to make an appointment.
And that appointment, all the speculation is that it'll probably be Judge Rebecca Bradley. Is that you heard that, obviously?
Well, and that is the speculation. I mean, it's the power of the governor to be able to make an appointment and make an appointment of somebody that he or she approves of. And it's obvious many of the governor's supporters like Judge Bradley, and I think it would not be a surprise if she gets the appointment.
Is it a good thing to be appointed by the governor right now? The latest poll out last week shows the governor with 37% job approval. Is it a good thing to have his endorsement, his appointment, as part of your resume?
Well, I think there's 2 sides to that. One, obviously, is that the governor's not particularly popular right now, and so to be his appointee might not be a good thing. The other thing is, I think the citizens of the state are really worried about the partisan nature of the court, and there's a lot of talk about whether certain justices are left or right or conservative or liberal, and I think the more that Judge Bradley gets tagged as the conservative candidate, the one who's going to support the governor, the more risk she's got as not being seen as independent for all those people that believe in an independent judiciary.
I think you've said that you would prefer to see him name an interim justice. Why is that?
Well, I think, first, for a couple of reasons. One, for the operation of the court. It's going to, whoever he appoints, if it's not somebody who's done appeals before, it's going to take some time for them to get up and running and used to it. And the court is already in session. It's already heard one set of arguments. Secondly, we've got an election in a few months, and it would give the population, the citizenry, a chance to pick the next justice. And so he could fill in that position, have somebody doing the work, and then the people could decide. But, a governor rarely bypasses an opportunity to exercise power, and I have no reason to think that Scott Walker will do it in this case.
Give us a sense of why it is important that someone, whether it be somebody who's going to run for office later or an interim, why somebody is sitting on that court right now.
Well, one of the biggest issues is that there are 6 members of the court right now rather than 7, and there is no way under our Constitution to replace a 7th member even for a case. So anytime that court becomes split 3-3 on a decision, there will be no decision of the court. And those cases that may wind up that way will have to be sent back to the Court of Appeals for either a decision or to affirm their decision. So it really does affect the work of the court. And when you have a court that's divided as often as they are, I think it's important that you've got that 7th vote so you can have a majority.
Bring me back full circle here now. Let's go back to 1993 when Governor Thompson named you to the court. You said at the time you were not a candidate.
Right.
And you hadn't decided whether you were going to run.
Right.
Why did you decide to run?
Well, part of the interview process was that question about running, and I did tell the governor at that time that if he did choose to appoint me, that I would run, that he wasn't going to appoint somebody for a short period of time. But I took a long time to think about that. I was a trial court judge, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to be able to sit on the court and be removed from the people the way those justices are. But ultimately, I decided, and the 2 people that were running in that race decided to drop out before the final election, and then I did have a candidate, but my opponent at that point was in jail for not paying child support, so it wasn't a tough race.
What's your gut tell you about next week? Do you think we'll see the governor name someone next week?
I do. I suspect the governor sending out the tweets and comments probably is scaring people away from applying. Both the other candidates who are running for the position have said they're not going to apply, and Judge Bradley might be the only person on that list, so we'll see.
Former State Supreme Court Justice Janine Geske. It's good to have you back on the program.
Thank you.
Thanks
Glad
very
to be
much.
here.
You bet. Next, Waukesha Company planning to lay off hundreds of people. Is it caught in a political battle? And remember, you can keep the conversation going throughout the week by following me at Mike Gousha on Twitter.